Why do the Soviet MBTs like the T-64 and the T-72 look a lot less agile than the Western ones? When they drive forward, they don't really see the difference, but the moment you try to go backwards or turn on the spot, all the speed suddenly disappears somewhere. Where is the difference coming from? Let's figure it out. During the early 50s, the military was seriously thinking about replacing T-54 since it was becoming more and more outdated. The new tank should have been better armed and protected, but it wasn't allowed to gain any weight. The goal was to keep the mass of the tank inside 36 tons. Designer Alexander Morozov made a logical assumption that armored air is quite wasteful to drive around. So he proposed to significantly decrease the under-armor hull volume and make the engine compartment as narrow as possible. Trying to make the machine as compact as it can get without getting too expensive, the designer found a simple, cheap, and quite original solution. Installed 2 epicyclic gearboxes, one for each side of the hull. At first glance, it would seem that 2 mechanisms would spend even more energy. So what would be cheap and compact about that? But firstly, they weren't really that big, and secondly, they had multiple things possible at the same time. Let's see. If we go forward, we use the same gears in both gearboxes. Need to turn? One of them gets to rotate slower than the other, and the relative caterpillar also starts going slower, making the tank gradually go sideways. Hence the economy on additional technologies, because we don't need any separate turning mechanisms anymore. Moreover, since you basically use brakes to change gears in an epicyclic gearbox, you don't need separate brakes as well. The construction turned out to be surprisingly simple and lightweight. All there was a flat transversal engine connected to 2 gearboxes that sped the machine up, turned it and slowed it down if needed. The T-64 was only 2 tons heavier than the T-54, while being a lot more powerful, agile, and better armored. But the decision also had its cost, and it was quite high. First of all, they had to cut away all reverse gears except one, and it was very slow. On the other hand, the military didn't require good backward speeds from the new tanks. They didn't plan for any tactical maneuvers that included going backwards, neither for changing positions, nor for escaping enemy fire. Secondly, they didn't make it possible to turn on the spot, at least not in a traditional way, when one caterpillar goes forward and the other goes backwards. In this case, one was going forward and the other one was being blocked. Thirdly, a tank of this construction is overall harder to control. For example, with the T-64 and the T-72, it's extremely easy to make a little mistake and send the tank skidding or even capsizing it. The Western tanks were being developed in a completely different way. No one even thought about sparing some money on transmissions. In fact, they were becoming more and more superior. They had at least 2 gears for going backwards and some a lot more. They also had a torque converter that gave engineers the opportunity of realizing an automatic transmission technology on a tank chassis. As for the turning mechanism, they'd started using hydrostatic transmissions, basically a combination of a hydraulic pump and an engine. They made it possible to control the tank with great precision at any speed. The driver only needed to touch the controls a little, and the heavyweight machine simply turned where it needed to go. Of course, these decisions also had a price. Everything does, you know. In this case, the comfort and maneuverability had a drawback in the form of a very complex construction, higher fuel consumption rates, and, most crucially, huge weight. For example, the power plant of the Leopard 2, including the engine, the transmission, and the cooling system, weighed about 8 tons on its own. On the other hand, these transmissions had a lot of development prospects, whereas the simplicity and the small size of the Soviet transmission didn't leave engineers the amount of room required for experiment. There was nowhere to improve them. The only option would be to change them completely.